The rain had been falling all afternoon, soft and steady, tapping against the cafe windows like a quiet metronome. Outside, the world was washed in muted grays, pedestrians moving slower under umbrellas, their footsteps blurred by puddles. Inside, the warm glow of amber light softened the edges of the little corner cafe. The air scented faintly of coffee, cinnamon, and something sweet from the oven. Amelia Blake sat alone at a table by the window, her wheelchair angled toward the glass. A navy sweater draped her slender frame, the sleeves pulled over her hands as if to shield her from more than the lingering chill in the air. Strands of golden hair, damp from the drizzle, framed a face that might once have been described as radiant before life had left its mark. Before her sat a small round cake, iced in white with delicate pastel flowers piped along the edge. There were no candles, no scattered wrapping paper, no chorus of voices to sing her name, just her, the cake, and the muted hum of strangers talking in low tones. Today should have been different. For 26 birthdays her mother had taken her here, ordering the same lemon tart to share, the same table by the window. They'd laugh, talk, and pretend the rest of the world didn't exist. But her mother was gone now, taken by a sudden stroke last winter that had left Amelia adrift in ways she still couldn't name. Her father hadn't called today. He was in Switzerland, buried in numbers and negotiations, as unreachable as the mountains he was meeting beneath. 2 years ago, she might have forgiven that. But 2 years ago, she could still walk. 2 years ago, she hadn't fallen on a solo climb. The snap of bone and cruel twist of fate stealing movement from everything below her waist. She hadn't expected celebration this year. She hadn't even wanted attention. Yet sitting there, staring at the untouched cake, the emptiness pressed harder than she thought it would. She lowered her gaze to her lap, willing herself not to care. And then, "Is it your birthday?" The voice was high and clear, a child's. Amelia blinked and looked up. A little girl stood beside her table, no more than 6 years old, her cheeks rosy from the cold. A yellow rain hat drooped slightly over bright brown eyes, and in her small hands she clutched a crumpled drawing of a cat wearing a party hat. The colors were smudged, as if she'd carried it through the rain without protection. "Can we sing with you?" the girl asked, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Before Amelia could answer, a man appeared behind her, placing a steady hand on the child's shoulder. "Ava," he said gently, "we shouldn't bother people." "But she's alone," Ava replied, her frown both earnest and determined. "Birthdays aren't supposed to be alone." The man looked mid-30s, his dark hair damp at the edges from the rain. A few days' stubble shadowed a face that carried both weariness and quiet kindness. His eyes met Amelia's with an apologetic glint, and he was already guiding the girl away when Amelia spoke. "Please," she said softly, surprising even herself. "Please, stay." There was a brief pause, a flicker of something in his gaze, surprise, maybe relief, before Ava beamed and scrambled into the chair beside Amelia. The man hesitated, then took the seat across from her. "You forgot candles," Ava observed, staring intently at the cake. "I guess I did," Amelia said, a ghost of a smile tugging at her lips. "That's okay," the girl replied matter-of-factly. "We can still sing." And sing they did. Off-key and slightly too loud, Ava leading with unshakable enthusiasm, while her father's deeper voice filled in the gaps. Amelia sat there, listening, the warmth of it seeping into her chest in a way she hadn't felt for months. When they finished, Amelia lowered her head, covering her mouth with one hand. Her shoulders trembled, not from embarrassment, but from the sudden rush of tears that burned hot against her lashes. She hadn't planned on crying. But kindness, unexpected, undeserved, has a way of breaking through the hardest shells. Ava tilted her head. Are you okay? Amelia nodded quickly, swiping at her eyes. Yes, she whispered. That was the best part of my day. The little girl smiled, proud of herself. Her father gave a small nod, saying nothing. For a while, the three of them sat there in easy silence, strangers bound for a moment by cake and rain and the unspoken understanding that no one should have to be alone on their birthday. And for the first time in a long while, Amelia Blake felt something shift, something small, but real. She didn't feel quite so alone. A week later, the skies over Windmere hung heavy with silver clouds. The little downtown strip was quieter than usual, the damp air carrying the mingled scents of rain-soaked pavement, fresh flowers from the shop next door, and faint lavender from somewhere inside the building. Amelia sat in the art studio between a florist and a bookstore, her wheelchair angled toward an easel that held a blank canvas. A thin brush rested in her left hand, her less dominant one now, while her right lay motionless in her lap. The room was hushed except for the soft scrape of bristles against canvas and the occasional murmur between other students. She was 3 weeks into a 6-week art therapy course, meant for stroke survivors, trauma patients, and anyone trying to relearn patience through creation. For Amelia, the act of painting wasn't about masterpieces. It was about proving to herself that she could still make something new in the life she hadn't chosen. Dipping her brush into a jar of pale blue, she tried to lay down a smooth stroke, but her lines wavered, uneven. Her therapist's mantra, "Beauty is in the effort," floated back to her. She wasn't sure she believed it yet. The bell above the studio door jingled, letting in a brief gust of cool air. A small voice called out, clear and delighted, "Daddy, that's her." Amelia looked up sharply. Through the doorway, she saw Ava standing there, her hair tucked under a knit hat, eyes bright as she pointed straight at Amelia. Behind her, Noah gave an almost sheepish wave. He said something to the receptionist, while Ava skipped off toward the adjacent children's art class, a box of crayons clutched in her arms. Amelia turned back to her canvas, though her hand trembled just enough to blur the next stroke. She didn't expect to hear his voice behind her. "I didn't know you were in this class," Noah said gently. Amelia glanced over her shoulder. "I didn't expect to see you either," she replied, offering a tentative smile. He nodded toward her canvas. "Better than anything I could do." A quiet laugh escaped her. "It's an abstract mess, but thank you." They fell into an easy silence, not the strained kind that made her wish for an escape, but the rare, comfortable kind she hadn't known she'd missed. He didn't ask what had happened to her, didn't glance at the wheelchair, didn't offer platitudes about strength or bravery. He just stood there, letting her be. "I drop Ava off here every week," he said at last. "She says it's the best hour of her life." "She's something," Amelia said softly. "She is," he agreed. "I'm still not sure how she turned out so bright." "Maybe because she sees the world without fear," Amelia suggested. He considered that. "Or maybe she's just lucky to know that love comes before judgment." Before Amelia could respond, Ava's voice carried in from the other room. "Daddy, we're painting cats today." Noah grinned and stepped back. "Duty calls." She watched him leave, a strange lightness settling in her chest. 2 days later, the rain returned, harder this time, drumming against rooftops and pooling in the uneven streets. Amelia had braved the weather to make it to her session, but when class ended, she found herself staring out at the downpour, her sweater too thin for the cold, and the sidewalk home slick with puddles. She hesitated, debating whether to wait it out. Then a dark shadow fell across her, and an umbrella popped open overhead. "Noah?" he said simply, his voice low but warm. He didn't announce himself beyond that. He didn't ask if she wanted help. He just placed one hand on the handles of her chair and began pushing, slow and steady, the umbrella sheltering them both. Their breaths fell into rhythm with the rain. Neither of them spoke on the walk to her building. She didn't give directions. Somehow he already seemed to know the way. When they reached her doorway, he parked her under the awning, closed the umbrella, and met her gaze briefly. "You good?" he asked. She nodded. "Yes." "Thank you." He gave a small nod in return and turned to go, his footsteps fading into the rain. Later that evening, when Amelia settled back into her usual spot by the window, she noticed something new on the side table near her painting supplies, a small white box the size of her palm. She opened it slowly. Inside was a petite lemon tart, its surface dusted with sugar. Resting on top was a folded note written in neat, careful handwriting. "Still rooting for you, no signature." But she didn't need one. She took a bite, and for the first time in months, it didn't just taste sweet. It tasted like someone had remembered her. And in the quiet of her apartment, she felt the smallest but surest spark of hope. The following week, winter edged closer. The air in Windermere carried the faint bite of frost, the kind that lingered on your breath and made the sky feel heavier. Amelia had been painting more lately, not because her technique was improving, but because the act itself had become a steadying rhythm. The brush in her left hand was no longer an intruder. She was at the cafe one crisp afternoon, swirling teal into gold on her palette, when Noah appeared at her table with 2 paper cups. "I thought tea might not be enough today," he said, setting one in front of her. The warmth seeped into her fingers as she accepted it. "Thank you." "How's the painting?" he asked, glancing at the canvas. She shrugged. "Not my best." "It looks honest," he said simply. "That counts for something." Her gaze dropped to the brush in her hand. "It's hard to feel in control anymore." "My life used to make sense." He nodded. "Mine didn't for a while either. I used to be a chef, high-end kitchen. Then Ava's mom got sick, cancer. I left it all behind to take care of her. After she passed, it was just me and Ava." Amelia paused, the quiet weight of his words settling over her. "That's a lot. It taught me to slow down," he said. "I spent years trying to be everything at once. Ava just needed me to be there." Her own voice was quieter now. 2 years ago, I climbed Bear's Peak alone. It was supposed to be a celebration. I slipped. The fall, the surgery, paralysis, and when I finally came home, my mother was gone. Noah didn't try to fix it. He didn't tilt his head with pity. He simply said, "I'm sorry, but I don't pity you. I admire you." It was strange how those words, simple, unadorned, could feel like something solid to hold on to. Later that week, Amelia was leaving art therapy when she saw him waiting under the glow of a street lamp, umbrella in hand. "She's inside," he said, nodding toward Ava's class. "I figured you'd want a dry ride." She smiled in surprise. "Thanks." As she rolled past, he called after her, "Get some. Sleep." It was nothing grand, but something about the way he said it stayed with her all night. 2 days later, the world cracked. Amelia was in her apartment when her phone began buzzing over and over, her mother's old ringtone, the one she'd deleted but somehow returned. She ignored it at first, but when the alerts kept coming, she finally picked up the phone. The headline glared at her in bold black. "CEO's crippled daughter in hiding, spotted in small-town cafe beneath it." A grainy photo of her in her wheelchair, smiling faintly through the cafe window. The caption was worse, twisting her life into something pitiful and shamed, painting her as a recluse, hidden away by her billionaire father. Her breath came fast and shallow. The betrayal in seeing her privacy stripped felt sharper than the fall had ever been. She deleted the app, turned off her phone, and closed the blinds. For 2 days, she vanished. No art class, no cafe, no replies. The doorbell rang once. She didn't answer. Someone left a small teddy bear outside with a note in a child's handwriting. Get better soon. Love, Ava. She pressed the bear to her chest, but didn't open the door. On the third night, just before midnight, there was a soft, hesitant knock. She stayed wrapped in her blanket on the floor, the apartment dim, except for a single candle flickering on the table. The door creaked open, letting in the faint scent of rain. Noah stepped inside, setting an umbrella in the corner and placing a cup of tea on the coffee table. He didn't try to speak. He didn't ask what was wrong. He simply lowered himself into the armchair beside her and stayed there. The silence was gentle, not demanding. Outside, the snow began to fall, blurring the edges of the world. Inside, her breathing slowed. Hours passed. At 4 a.m., she startled awake to find him still there, asleep in the chair, the empty mug in his hand. "You stayed?" she whispered. He stirred, his voice low and rough from sleep. "That's what you do for someone you care about." Something in her chest gave way, not breaking, but softening. She reached out, placing her hand over his, not to thank him, but to keep him there. They didn't speak again. Together they simply watched the snow melt in the gray light of morning. And in that quiet, Amelia realized something she hadn't understood before. Healing didn't always come from words, but from the presence of someone who refused to leave when the world did. Sunlight spilled through the cafe windows in gentle ribbons, warming the worn wooden floorboards and catching the steam from Amelia's cup. The noise was soft, just the clink of cups, the hum of conversation, and the scratch of her brush against canvas. She had been painting with more certainty lately. The lines were still imperfect, her left hand still unsteady, but each stroke felt less like a struggle and more like a choice. On her easel today was the faint outline of a mountain, brushed in gold as if sunlight had found its way across something broken. When Noah appeared at her table, she didn't flinch anymore. He set down 2 mugs and tilted his head toward her work. "They're getting bolder," he said. She smiled faintly. "So am I." Over the next week, her canvases deepened in color. Candlelight on a cracked wooden chair, a little girl pressing sugar hearts into icing, a rain-soaked street lamp. She signed each one with looping letters, Amelia Millie Blake. It was during one of these afternoons, paint still drying on her hands, that the cafe door opened and her father stepped inside. James Blake's presence was like the click of a closing boardroom door, controlled, sharp, deliberate. He scanned the room, his eyes finding her instantly. "Is that the child they say you've been spending time with?" he asked without greeting, glancing toward Ava at a nearby table. Amelia's stomach tightened. "That's Ava," she replied evenly. "She's just a little girl who likes sugar and has a big imagination." James's mouth pulled into a frown. "Your father knows nothing of this. You shouldn't associate yourself with people of lesser standing." She closed her sketchbook, her hands trembling, not from weakness, but from the effort of holding her ground. "He's more real than any executive you've ever put in front of me. He doesn't care that I fell. He just stays." For a moment, her father's expression didn't change. Then he turned and left without another word, leaving the cafe quieter than before. Amelia sat back, feeling the weight of his disapproval settle like a heavy coat. But when Ava bounded over to show her a lopsided sugar heart, grinning from ear to ear, Amelia knew she had already made her choice. That weekend, she wheeled into the community center next to the cafe with her art supplies balanced on her lap. The room was bright and messy, tables set with brushes, paint, and paper. Children began to filter in, some in wheelchairs, some with crutches, some needing steady hands to guide theirs. "Mrs. Millie," she introduced herself, watching their faces light up, not with pity, but curiosity. Noah helped set out chairs while Ava darted from table to table, offering paint jars and picking up dropped brushes. Amelia watched her, pride swelling quietly in her chest. After class, Ava tugged on her sleeve. "Will you paint with me?" Under the cafe's golden lamplight, they sat side by side, Ava painting sunflowers with too many petals, Amelia sketching a mountain in rose and blue. Noah brought tea without asking and joined them in the small talk of ordinary life. Winter coming early, favorite ice cream flavors, Ava's school recital. Somewhere between a shared laugh and a steady glance, Amelia's hand brushed Noah's. That night he drove her home. Snow flurries spun in the headlights, settling softly on the hood. She turned to him in the quiet. "It still hurts," she said, "but it doesn't define me anymore." Noah's eyes held hers, warm and steady in the dim glow. He placed his hand over hers, fingers fitting like something meant to be found. The kiss that followed was gentle, less about urgency, more about the careful beginning of trust. When they parted, the world outside was still cold, but inside, Amelia felt something warm, steady, and entirely her own. She was no longer painting just to fill empty hours. She was painting because she had something worth painting for. The school's multi-purpose room had been transformed with cardboard trees, painted backdrops, and paper butterflies hanging from the ceiling. Folding chairs squeaked as parents shifted for a better view. Somewhere backstage, children's voices tumbled over each other in whispers and giggles. Amelia sat near the front row, a bouquet of wildflowers in her lap. Her hair was braided to one side, her pale blue dress chosen by Ava herself. Beside her, Noah's hand rested gently over hers. On her other side, Lisa fidgeted with the ends of her friendship bracelet, barely containing her excitement. The principal gave a short welcome, the lights dimmed, and the play began. Ava, dressed in a sparkly bee costume, delivered her 2 lines with the gravity of a Broadway performer. Amelia clapped, her chest swelling with quiet pride. The final song ended. Parents applauded. Cameras flashed. But instead of retreating backstage, Ava stepped forward, her small hands gripping the microphone stand. "I have something more important than a song," she said, her voice bright and steady. "Can my family come up here, please?" Noah's brow furrowed, glancing at Amelia. The teacher in the wings gestured for them to approach. He helped her maneuver her wheelchair up the ramp, Lisa skipping behind. When they reached Ava, she opened a small velvet box with the confidence of someone who'd rehearsed this moment in her heart for days. "Mommy Millie," she said, her eyes shining, "will you marry Daddy Noah?" The room went still for a heartbeat, and then gasps, soft laughter, and a few muffled sobs rippled through the crowd. Amelia pressed her hand to her mouth, startled. She turned to Noah, whose expression was a mix of surprise and something warmer, deeper. "I had a different plan," he murmured, a hint of a smile on his lips, "but she beat me to it." Taking the box from Ava, he knelt beside Amelia's chair and opened it to reveal a simple silver band with a small diamond, quiet, unpretentious, and perfect. Her voice trembled, but her eyes were clear. "Yes," she said softly. Then, stronger, "Yes, not because you complete me, but because you reminded me I was whole all along." The applause was instant, filling the room with warmth. Ava bounced in place, clapping for them, as if she'd just won the school talent show. Noah slid the ring gently onto Amelia's finger. They looked at each other for a long, unbroken moment. Two people choosing each other without illusions, without rescue missions, just truth. Weeks later, the cafe that had witnessed so many small beginnings was strung with pastel bunting and golden fairy lights. At the center table sat a cake with the words, "To Ava and the bravest woman I know." Beside it stood the framed message Noah had once given her: "Beauty isn't symmetry, it's sincerity," and a small canvas painting of two hands joined beneath a rain-soaked umbrella. The room filled with familiar faces: parents from Ava's school, Amelia's art therapist, neighbors from the bookstore. Conversations hummed under the warm glow, then the door opened, and James Blake stepped inside. No entourage, no phone in hand. Just a man who suddenly looked older than Amelia remembered. "I owe you a real apology," he began quietly when he reached her. "I was wrong for not being there when you needed me most. I was scared, so I hid, and I'm sorry." Amelia's throat tightened. She didn't speak right away. Before she could, Ava, never one to leave a silence unfilled, climbed onto her chair and announced into the small mic, "Happy birthday to the family I got to choose." Something in the room shifted. James's eyes glistened as he reached out, taking both Amelia's and Noah's hands in his own. "I see it now," he said softly. This is what love looks like." Applause rose again, not loud, but deep and steady, wrapping around them like a promise. That night, after the party, Amelia sat by her apartment window. The framed words still within reach. Ava's laughter echoed faintly from the street below where Noah was walking her home. This wasn't the life she'd planned. No grand climbs, no perfect symmetry. But in its place she had something better. A life stitched together with chosen moments, steady hands, and the kind of love that doesn't rescue you, but stays beside you while you rescue yourself. And as the snow began to fall, Amelia understood that she hadn't been found because she was lost. She had been seen because she had always been worth seeing.